All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, this is Joe Jay Outspoken. Today, we are going to be discussing when God uses heartbreak to transform you. So, yeah, this should be a good one, Joe. We've all went through that heartbreak situation.
More than you want to think. More than you want to think. You know what I mean?
Yeah, some of us more than others,
Yeah,
right?
clearly.
And heartbreak to different people takes on different forms.
Yeah.
So everybody experiences it differently and reacts to it differently, right?
Well,
So,
on today's episode, we're going to explore why God sometimes let your heart shatter, brother, and how he uses that season to reshape your entire life, bro. But, like our last episode, we misinterpret a lot of things. So let's talk about it.
We do that. We misinterpret a lot. So, all right. Well, let's get into this. All right, everybody, welcome back. Here we go on our latest episode, when God uses heartbreak to transform you. So before we get started, make sure and smash that like button, subscribe to Outspoken, share the show with everyone you know, and hit the bell icon to get updated when we upload new episodes. So when's the last time you had heartbreak that transformed you?
Man, you know what? I want to say, and I don't know if it was really heartbreak, but it had to do with it. I mean, I'm sure it was because it changed a lot of perspectives. It changed a lot of things, and it kind of pushed me to find myself, right? And of course, with the guidance of my son and then you, I did, but I think it was that, at the moment you're all thinking, man, what does my life come to? You know what I mean? And the truth of it is, there's breakups that hurt your feelings, and then there's breakups that break your identity. You know what I mean?
Right.
It just totally collapse it. You don't, not that the last one was that, but I've had them where you just, you don't know where, for example, my marriage, you're in there for 20 plus years, and you're like, you don't know anything different. You don't know anything better. Your identity was that. And,
right.
And, at that moment, you're thinking about it like, oh man, relief, not relief. But then you start realizing, who am I? What have I become? And then we talked about this at one episode, that it's not really that you've changed who you are, but in a marriage, you adapt, you kind of absorb who those people are. You lose your own identity, and you kind of gear it towards family. You got kids, you got everything's going on in life. And so you have to kind of mold yourself to that. And people lose themselves, right? And we go through a process where it's just like a cycle. It's just, you're just going through the motions. It is what it is. This is my life now. But it shouldn't be that way. But of course, that's how we think at the time. So I kind of want to call it like the dark night of the soul, right? And I think it's like when God allows a relationship to fall apart, not exactly to destroy you, right? Because there are people that depending on their mental capacity, it does destroy them, right? But God doesn't do that. I think he allows not to, but to strip away like the false self, right? To expose any wounds that you've been avoiding, right? To rebuild you to something or someone that's stronger, that's wiser, and spiritually grounded. And see, that's the key. I think that last one is the key, spiritually grounded, because we were created by our Creator for his purpose, to serve others. And so if we're not spiritually grounded, if we have that disconnect, it's in the Bible. Like if we don't have someone that matches our grit, that matches our spirituality, it's bound to fall apart, right? And so if you have someone and not that my ex had that, but she was a different religion, and we never grounded ourselves spiritually. And of course, kids paid for that, but that's just what happened. And I think there was a point where, like, God said, like, there's not going to be any peace here. There's not going to be no happiness. There's not going to be nothing. You're going through emotion. Let's cut it, right? And of course, you think of the moment, not of the past, not of the future, not of anything like that. And I think that's important because, but here's the thing, Jay, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? But these are the things that when our identity collapses, and this is what I'm talking about, the future you imagine when that person dies, right? In your mind, you have this portrait, you have this picture. This is us. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30, 40 years. And then that thing just dies, bro. When it ends, it dies, right? The version of yourself you built around that person crumbles. Because imagine you're adapting to somebody, so you're building you around this person. And when that person's gone, it
Absolutely.
just boom, done, right?
Yeah.
Your emotional patterns get exposed, right? Your coping mechanisms stop working, right? It's just not heartbreak, bro. It's like a spiritual surgery.
Yeah, well, the whole relationship facade, and that's not saying it as a bad thing. It's just it's like you get together and you're like, what do you see yourself? Oh, well, I want the white picket fence. I want us to both have perfect jobs, that we get to spend time together, and we get to take 3.2 vacations every year, and all this kind of stuff. And exactly what you said, as that time goes on, it just life's not perfect, man. It doesn't work out perfect.
Right.
I think that's the problem, especially nowadays, especially right now. You take like the Instagrams of the world, right? And folks look at other people, their life is perfect. They're traveling, they're seeing all these things, and you don't know what they're actually going through because they do not post the negativity
Right.
on. Now, you do have the people that do only post negativity, right? All the drama in their life. You can always see it because they'll put up the meme. I've been hurt this one time, but never again. Well, they're just, those people, what they're going through. Angry souls, man. So you had mentioned not being on the same wavelength or what have you. 2 Corinthians 6:14, it says, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness, and what communion has light with darkness? I mean, we are called to be with a partner, with somebody and this goes for even people that were around. Now, the tough thing with that is that we are also called to go into the lion's den, right? And basically be around people that aren't believers, because that's how we pull them in. When it comes to a relationship, especially for men, right? I believe that the female that you pick has a lot to do with how your whole life is going to go. Because most guys, we try to put a lot into, and women will argue this maybe, but we try to put a lot into the relationship. And let's say some guys have time, so they put a lot of time into it. Some guys have a lot of effort, right? They put a lot of effort into it. Other guys maybe have a lot of money, and they put a lot of money into it. At one point or another, if she's unsatisfied and really tells you that, then all of that bank that you built up with her, you just want to pull it back. You don't want to have anything to do with that anymore, right? And the problem is, for us guys over time, I know I fell into that too, is that you are with somebody and you go through that whole thing. Every relationship starts out great, because we've asked this before. Well, why'd you stay with that person? Well, it didn't start out like that, right? It started out, rainbows and roses, right? It was everything was good. And then it was just like clouds and nightmares at the end, So now you have that, and let's say you saw red flags. That's the new term or whatever, the term of the day. And you saw red flags throughout that period of time. And now you get into a fresh relationship, right? A new relationship. That person does one thing that's kind of like what you've experienced in the past, and that's a red flag. I'm never going to deal with that again. And it already puts a brick in the wall that you're building in this relationship, right? So we're building new walls in a new relationship that shouldn't have.
We're not even new walls. You're just adding to the walls that you already have. So you're just isolating yourself from the world. And we talked about this in an episode. Remember, we talked about those type of where you bring your past relationship to the new one. We've talked about that. And here's the beauty of it, Jay. And this is something that the more you study the Bible, the more you get involved, and you bring God into your life or into your picture, is that we always think like, we forget about God until we need him, right? And when we need him is usually because we're in pain. And pain becomes the place God speaks the loudest, right? Because that's when we seek him the most and we need him the most. But the thing about heartbreak, the thing about God, is that he's steady. He's there. He's like that faithful puppy. Doesn't leave your side. He's there. You might be going this way, might going that way. You might get on the bus to go to school. The puppy just sitting there waiting for you. Like, he coming back.
I've never heard anybody call Jesus.
I'm not calling him a puppy, but you know what I mean. It's called a metaphor, man. It's called a metaphor. So,
no, but it's a puppy.
They are cute. Everyone loves a puppy.
Who doesn't love puppies?
So the crazy people, people who don't love Jesus, the crazy people. Anyway,
yeah, the ones torturing all the beagles.
Oh man, So here's the thing. I think God uses heartbreak to reveal what you've been avoiding, right? Because we tend to avoid things in life. And this is how we avoid them. We just got to push through. We make excuses. We do what it is. You're just avoiding them. But the reality of things is it's not going to go away no matter how much you ignore it, right? I tried doing that to my brothers. I ignored them all the time, and my toys still get destroyed, right? It didn't work. Ignoring people it does not work. Or avoiding the problems doesn't work. You know what heartbreak does? It exposes unhealed wounds, right? Things that you thought were done, unhealthy attachments. It reveals unhealthy attachments, right? You may have lived a good life, but it's not a healthy life. You know what I mean? And it's good only because you've created that image in your head that, oh, this is good. It's not better. It's, oh, you know what? I could have had a guy who's a drug addict. I could have had a woman who's a drug addict who likes to be sleeping around. So I'm lucky just to have what I have, right?
Right.
It exposes idols you didn't even know you had, right? Because we shouldn't idol people. We shouldn't idolize them, right? People do that. Right. We shouldn't. He's the best man ever. She's the greatest woman ever. We shouldn't do that, right? It also exposes patterns that you keep repeating, right? We talk about patterns in our men's group all the time, and
we never repeat.
Yeah. But we do. We repeat patterns over and over. Won't happen again. Yeah. Repeat. Oh, won't happen again. Right.
Yeah.
And it's also.
I promise, Lord, I'll never drink like this again.
Yeah, sounds good.
Get me through.
How many times we said that? Here's the biggest thing that heartbreak exposes, brother. The parts of you that weren't surrendered to God. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yep.
You're like you're like you owe me that, homie. You haven't surrendered that to me. Boom, post. And you start thinking about it and like, man, what am I doing? You know? And here's the thing, Jay. This is what we don't think about because we think of the moment. We never think of the future. We never think about what could happen. And if we do, that creates anxiety to a lot of people. But we don't think about, and this is what I mean about the future. I don't mean about the future of your life, but the future of the fact that regardless of what you feel or believe or you think, we're going to die. We're going to go away. Our time here will cease. And I'd rather prepare myself as there is a God than not. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
yeah, 100%.
And like I said earlier, bro, pain becomes a place where God speaks the loudest, right? And in those dark nights, bro, distractions fall away, right? Because now you're exposed, you're open. Remember, it's like an open wound. You're exposed, right? Pride breaks, clarity rises. You know, God's voice becomes unmistakable, and you know it. You know, but people have a hard time, even then, even through heartbreak. They blame God, but we never see the positive end of things. So we know that our God's a merciful God. He's a good God, but we want to blame him for the bad things. When in reality, we should be blaming ourselves for the bad things because we don't listen. We're not captive of the warning signs, right? Yeah. And we don't listen. And so bad things happen. We don't listen. It's like when you're a kid. If you don't listen, mom says, hey, don't touch that. It's hot. You're going to burn your hand. And you don't listen and you go touch it. What happens? You burn your hand, right?
You burn your hand. Well, you had to learn the hard way, boy.
And what? We look at mom. We blame mom. We cry. Mom comes, hugs us, and gives us, I told you, little dum-dum, right? And you know, it is.
You little moron.
For the longest time, I thought dum-dum was my middle name, but clearly not. But you know, but in these moments of heartbreak, Jay, I think this is where you can talk. You can talk about the heartbreak to God. You could find the identity. You could look and see like clarity, and that's what God is giving you. He's giving you that clarity. Like, hey, listen, this is not for you. You know, and wake up. And I think that's key. And I think that's important. People fail to see that. What do you think?
I popped up a couple other Bible verse things in here. So one of the things that the Bible talks about is, for men in particular, we should look for a woman who fears the Lord, possesses inner beauty, and is trustworthy and wise and kind. That comes out of Proverbs 31, 10 through 31. Key traits include being suitable as a helper. All right. So the thing is today's society is so terrible because of with the extreme feminism. It's like, well, I'm not there for a man, I'm here for me. I'm a, boss babe, whatever, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, we're both supposed to be helpers to one another. I heard it say, and I haven't looked it up. I don't know if it's true, but they were talking about somewhere in like the Netherlands or something like that. This really rich lady, I guess her husband died, whatever the case is. She bought this island, right? and she set it up for her and her girlfriends and friends of those girlfriends. Anyways, long story short, only women could go there. So they, got some stuff set up there. Anyhow, it's just a bunch of women going there. Well, months go by and AC starts breaking down and, plumbing's backing up and all these kind of things. And they're trying to get women to come work on it. Like they can't get enough women to come over to this island, right, to fix it. So eventually they have to break down and get men to come in there. And I'm not saying that women can't be plumbers and all those kind of things. What I'm saying is that that's what we're there for, right? We're there to be a helper to women, and they're there to be a helper to us in the categories that we're just better at, right? That we excel at. Women are better with empathy things. That's why most teacher roles are women, most nursing roles are women, most, all these things that are nurturing roles usually are overwhelmingly employed by women. Correct. Crazy, dangerous, exciting jobs like underwater welder out in the middle of the ocean on oil platforms and rigs and stuff like that. That's all. There's like zero women that do that.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because one, there's no attractiveness to that, right? There's no good feeling about it. It's just a job, and it's
labor,
a ton of money, and it's
labor
super labor intensive, and usually very.
And I don't want.
Coal miners,
honestly, as a man, I don't want a woman working out there in those environments.
Absolutely,
equality
not. Absolutely
out the
not.
door. Don't give me that BS, ladies. I don't want. When I look at women, and don't make this weird, people. When I look at women, I picture my mom or my daughter. I don't want them working in that. I don't want them doing that.
That's right. 100%,
and that's how I see it.
Yeah,
and you.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Dude, if we were, I know we're in law enforcement, you worked alongside women. And I think about it. We got some guys in our group that are we're in the military, and I would have a hard time, man, if I was over in the sand in Afghanistan or something like that. And you're in a foxhole or wherever you're at, right? Up on a tower, behind a bush in a hill, riding a camel, whatever.
You're ridiculous.
And you and your buddies are all there, and there's one female in the group. Do you, seriously, man, and answer this honestly, do you think, so we would all care about each other as guys, we're taking care of it, watching each other six, all that kind of stuff. Do you really think that every guy in that squad wouldn't be a little bit more concerned about the female in the group?
Almost by far, yeah. Because again, most people
100%.
know women, they're their moms or sisters, and they're like, man, and they're going to be so focused on protecting her that they're,
that you may miss something. You could have spotted somebody for your other buddy over here, kind of thing. Yeah, and so it's. Sometimes these roles are kind of we were set up for roles that we were set up for, man, and I think it's one of the things that really has messed up society.
That is old people thinking. No, you're right. I agree. 100%.
It is.
I want to,
and I'm not saying that we can't do stuff that are primarily women roles and they can't do stuff that's primarily our roles, but I think there's a reason that for thousands of years we have all picked the roles that we do, because it makes sense naturally. I mean, the animal kingdom doesn't switch that up, right?
Why should we? Right? But here, you brought in a passage. Let me bring one up. Hosea 2:14 through 15. It says, God leads us into the wilderness to restore us. Right? Basically, that's heartbreak, right? That's where he leads you, to the wilderness, right? So God often when he does that, when that happens, people don't take that moment to talk to God and realize what's happening. But in that moment, God is rebuilding your identity, right?
So so I actually, it's funny you brought up that verse there. So I looked up just general Google AI kind of thing, and this is what it says. God uses heartbreak as a transformative tool to recalibrate your path, deepen your dependence on him, and protect you from destructive paths, turning pain into purposeful growth. This painful process breaks down pride, fostering humility, resilience, and a clearer vision to see your life from his perspective. I thought that was pretty good for AI.
So AI is pretty smart. AI is pretty smart. But like I said, so that's where God rebuilds your identity, right? In the wilderness. He strengthens your emotional resilience, right? Because you're going through it. And this is not just breakups, but in life in general, right? He teaches you boundaries, boundaries that you didn't have before or knew that you needed, right? He reshapes your desires, right? From some ridiculous desires of of earthly possessions to desires of heavenly ones, right? And what really is important, you know, he restores your dignity that you lose because there's disrespect or there's whatever the case is. He restores you, you know, and he prepares you for a healthier love. That is the key right there. A healthier love, and not just any love, but the love that is written in the Bible. 1 Corinthians 13:4-7 is exactly the kind of love that God has for his children and that we should have for others. And that is what people fail to see. People define love how they see fit. Here's one good example is people loving others expecting something in return. That's not
transactional
that's
relationships.
not love, bro.
Yep.
That's not love whatsoever. That's just, tit for tat, right? That's what that is.
It's exactly what it is. Yeah.
And people don't understand that. People are, and women demand better. Men, the same. Demand better than that. Love is not an emotion. I keep saying this. We had an episode talking about love, and I said it very clear. Love is not an emotion. It's an act. It's something that you do, not to see what you get in return, not to feel like this person owes me, but because that's what we're called to do, to serve others, to love others, like Jesus loved his church, loves his church. So it's important, right? So what's the difference between God breaking you and life breaking you? There is a difference, right? Life breaks you to weaken you, but God breaks you to rebuild you. Very different, bro. Very different. And I think this is very powerful because I think that the more people realize that this is a life thing. This is like, and if you allow that to weaken you, then that's on you. But when God breaks you, he's rebuilding you. He's restoring you to God's identity, to the identity that he gave us, and I think that's key. And a lot of people don't know that. And that's the thing, bro. That's one thing that we talk about in our men's group is our identity in Christ, right? And people have lost that. And I think the further people get away from God, the harder the heartbreaks are, the harder life is, the harder it is to maneuver and navigate through society because we don't know how to react. Excuse me. We don't know how to react. I got the hiccups for some reason. We don't know how to react to that. And that's important. And I think that we've fallen short of his glory again because we keep wanting to do things our way. And you, bro, know me. Yeah. I'm the number one suspect on that, bro. I always did things my way, right?
We're all there, man. We're all there.
And so,
and our big thing is our, and we talked about this at our Bible study the other night too, man, is our lack of trust.
Yeah.
There's that old game that you would play when you were a kid, and then they do this sometimes at like leadership conferences and stuff like that. And so where you put a blindfold and you stand on an elevated platform, not really high, but you just fall backwards and you have people catch you. And dude, have you ever done that before?
Nah, bro, I don't trust anyone to do that because, first off, I eat one too many burritos, bro, and I'm going to take a couple people to catch me. You know what I
mean? So, you think about it, these are people that are being set up to, I mean, it's almost like you have no worries, fully trust somebody, right? And we still don't trust, even when we know we can, when there's no reason that we can't trust. So it is very understandable. It's not right, but it's very understandable that we have that same feeling towards God, that we have this distrust that, I've been doing it myself this whole time. I can't just leave it in God's hands with, and not, do something on my own. And it makes it it's difficult because we are told by faith to have the ultimate faith, right? Just like when Jesus is in the boat with the disciples, all of these people walked hand in hand with him and were with him every step of the way. And they wake him up and he was like, you have little faith. Like, here you are, you've witnessed all this stuff, people being raised from the dead, boils being taken off of them, the blind could see, and we're in the middle of the water and you're worried that we're going to drown. You think I'm going to let you guys drown out here? So that's the thing, is that we have to, turn the corner on our faith and be able to be more faithful and trust that he's going to put us on the right path and putting the right people in our path. One of the big things, and you mentioned something earlier, is that we don't pay attention when stuff's going right. So the good parts of our relationship, what are we doing? We're partying, we're doing all this stuff. We're not we're not saying thanks. We're not giving thanks for that. And we're not telling even our, whether it's our spouse or better half, hey, I appreciate you for being such an amazing person with me, you know. Um, but when stuff goes south, what are we doing? Oh God, make this better, fix it, fix it. So when, again, we've talked about this a bunch of times, when you're in the valley, you're praying to him, please make the sickness go away, all this. But when you're on high, when you're doing good, you forget about him. When he's thinking about you, the only time you're thinking about him is when you're down in the valley, then that's where he's going to keep you. So your relationships are probably going to be messed up all the time. And again, those relationships that you go through that, we called it heartbreak. Maybe that's not your definition of it, but when you go through these tumultuous times with somebody, it's a learning experience, and pray about that and make sure that that's not something that, especially if and you recognize after the fact that it was you, that you were the common denominator in the problems, right? That you don't carry that forward into another relationship.
Yeah.
And, and it's hard, man, because, we've talked about this many times. How many times you're like, I have a hard time trusting somebody, right? We just talked about being able to trust somebody falling back. How do I trust this person and give them my everything, and they may pull the rug out from under my feet. And now here I am in the same situation again, so it gets tough.
Yeah.
But biblical scripture really can kind of help keep you on pace. That equally yoked thing, man, is very important. That, whoever it is needs to be on the same page as you, because if they are not a believer and you are, it's really never going to work properly. It really won't.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Jay, that people don't understand. Relationships has to end everyone has a calling. Everyone has a calling under biblical belief. There's a calling for everyone, right? Whether it's good or bad, you have a calling, and there's a purpose for you regardless. And when you have these heartbreaks, this relationship ends the way they do, God's calling on you. God's calling to you. Sometimes God, in doing so, God removes the person you were idolizing, right? Because you can't do that, right? The relationship that was distracting you, right? Because you needed to pay attention to God. You needed to get closer to God. And this relationship you were in was distracting you from that because he was or she wasn't letting you get there, right? Maybe that attachment was draining you, right? And you didn't even know it. It was just sucking you, taking everything out of you, right? Or maybe it was just the version of yourself that wasn't aligned with God, right? And there comes a point where God says, look, enough, done. There's such a thing as divine protection. And unfortunately, sometimes that's disguised as heartbreak. And people don't see it. People are like, they curse God. They're like, why? This was the best thing ever. But it wasn't, because God has bigger plans for you, better things for you, and that's where people forget. So let me ask this. How do you know if you are part of that God ordained heartbreak? How do you know? So I think there's going to be signs, right? I mean, not literally signs like the movie Signs, where there's aliens or signs like God's talking to you, right? Because people are like, I didn't
just leaving water everywhere, glasses of water everywhere.
They have no idea why. But like for example, you'll feel stripped but not abandoned, right? You'll feel stripped, like everything's gone, but you don't feel abandoned, right? You're grieving, but you're still growing, right? I think that's another sign. You're hurting, but becoming more self-aware, right? And I'm telling you from experience, man. I went through this. Here's a big one. You're losing someone, but you're finding God. You're like, oh man, that's what was missing, right? Or you're being empty, but also being rebuilt. Does it make sense? Right? And if that is happening to you, if you're feeling any of those, then you know that God's working in you and through you to become the person you're meant to be. So, like all things that die, under the Bible, there's the resurrection. Right? Every dark night has a dawn. Am I right? So when that happens, though, when you find yourself in these heartbreaks and you're at the and you're coming to the dawn, when you're resurrecting with your new self that God has now put on you and created, you have God. God brings to you clarity, right? Brings peace, a new identity, new standards, new strength, new purpose, and eventually a healthier love, right? Because God has rebuilt you for his purpose, and that's the thing. A lot of people don't see that. A lot of people sit there and think like, you're wrong. clearly you're not right because your relationship ended. You know what I mean? So the chances of me being correct because mine are biblically supported versus your belief that
Yeah.
you know everything, I'm going to stick with the Bible. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. You're a marriage counselor and you're on your third
Yeah.
marriage. I don't know if you're the right person for this job. So just saying. Yeah. Joe mentioned just a few minutes ago, 1 Corinthians 13:4-7. That verse says, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. That one that I just passed right there, it is not easily angered. We're going to come back to that. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always preserves. So, one of the things for men in relationships is anger. You know, not that women don't get angry too, but it's one of those big things that we can, they push our buttons, test us, and we get fired up over it. And then we say stuff that we're not supposed to, that we know is going to hurt their feelings and what have you. And again, this goes back to your last relationship where you had this, broken heart. What did you do in that relationship that you would have done different if you could go back to it and start it all over again? Now, some people are like, I would never go back to that person. Yeah, that's fine. Understand that you were with them in the beginning. And just like we said at the beginning of the episode, it started out great at one point because you wouldn't have been with them, right? You would have been with them for one date or whatever it was, and you would have been out of there. You stayed with them for a while, and maybe you moved in together. Maybe you got married. And what did you do that now, if you could get in a DeLorean and go back in time, what would you do different to have made that whole deal last? And you and I have talked about it many times, man. I mean, I've said it, and I've said it to many people totally publicly. If I could go back in time to where I am now versus where I was when my ex-wife and I got separated and then ultimately divorced, I mean, I would have got on my knees and begged her to stay, right? But I was too prideful as a man at that time, and I was too immature in my faith and being a man with the responsibility of a woman. And I was like, all right, you don't want to be together anymore?
Yeah.
Get out of here, kind of thing, And again, that's one of the things that I know is tough for me because I have that in me to where I'll just brush you off and I'm done with you, kind of thing. And I've tried to be better, and those are things so that's for me. What is it for you? You have a thing that you need to work on that, in your last relationship, your last 2, the last 10 relationships have had issues. And maybe it's not just love relationships, romantic, could be family relationships. Do you run into either we have said stuff or we know people that constantly complain about the same thing with their relationships and their families, with their romantic relationships. And it's like, it sounds like you kind of experience the same thing every time. So you're either like super tuned into picking the same people that have the same issues all the time, or you're bringing that issue out in that person all the time. Right. So, again, these are these things that we need to recognize in ourselves. And when you start reading the Bible, you start to realize that you are imperfect, but that's okay. Yeah. That's okay that we're imperfect, and that, our whole design is to try to live up to a perfect life that we know we'll never get to because we're imperfect, but we have the design, we have Jesus, we have the story, we have the roadmap and the searchlight that we're headed towards, that is guiding our way. We're going to stumble a lot along that way, but we still have this roadmap that we can much easier for us to make better of our relationships and stuff that we have down the line. So it's really important, man, to read up and then examine yourself and stop blaming everything on everybody else and the world around you and everything. And I'm not saying to blame yourself. I'm saying look in yourself and see the things that constantly are an issue in your life. And there could be a reason that one thing is constantly an issue in your life that I keep causing that issue. And again, reading scripture, it really opens your eyes to that stuff where I think we're, and again, I can't speak for women. We're men. Men are very stubborn, right? We don't talk. We don't open up to stuff. And, sometimes that's to our downfall.
Yeah.
We need to be more open to understanding that we don't have it all together and we never will. And that's okay, because again, there's a good roadmap that's been built for us, and it's not that hard to follow. It's hard to follow, but it's not that hard to follow.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, and you're 100% correct on that. And I think that for everyone it's different, but there is a purpose. Heartbreak isn't the end of the road, but it's the beginning of a new you. God is preparing you for a better life, but one that includes Him. And again, if you fail to listen, then you're just going to end up in the same path over and over again, and God's going to keep bringing it up. God's going to keep disrupting your life because He knows what we need. We don't. And there's a verse, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 through 6. And it goes like this. And all we have to, basically what that says is that we have to trust in God. We have to trust in what His path is for us and the life that He is preparing for us. We can't trust on our own understanding because we'll never understand. We won't understand why we go through heartbreak. We'll never understand why we lose a loved one. We'll never understand why people disappear from our lives. But we have to trust that God knows and that He's done it for a reason. And that reason is always for us to be better, to grow in trust in Him. It's the moments that you ignore that your life then takes a turn. And it's not always for the best. And you could live a happy life, a good life for the moment, but then it's all going to come down. Why? Because you're not following what God is leading you. So trust in the Lord. He has the best understanding for you. Trust me, man. I thought I knew I had the answers to everything, and I did it my own way, and I was wrong every single time because I always thought thought about it for myself, and I never included God in it. You know, the time I remembered God when things were not happening the way I thought they would.
That's always when we start praying to Him, God, please fix this or do this for me. You think about this, man, even people that are not believers or they're kind of distant believers, what do? Oh, please, God, fix this. Oh, God, if you're real,
please make this a misdemeanor, not a felony, please.
Yeah, right. And again, when we're on the yacht, right, we're making $10,000 a day. We forget Him. We forget about Him. And, that's the shame about it. Right. And so, yeah, definitely learn from your, past mistakes, dive into the scripture. Cause I can't tell you enough how much it makes a difference in the way you perceive and look at the world and your own thoughts and processes and everything like that. And yes, the Bible does say to be, forgiving and love your neighbor, love your fellow man. And that stuff's important, but it also has warnings and things for us. I'll leave it with this. One of the negative things that the Bible has, and it's not negative, but one of the things to avoid in a relationship is in Matthew 5:28, warns against looking at women with lust, emphasizing that a godly man focuses on her character rather than only physical attraction. We are men. We see lady in bikini, and it's just natural for us, right, to be excited or look or what have you. And that's not what it's all about, right? So there's nothing wrong with admiring beauty. We've talked about this before too. There's nothing wrong with that. God made stuff.
I admire myself every morning when I look in the mirror.
There you go.
Well, you're welcome.
I admire myself with the lights off. That's usually the
way. You ain't wrong, brother. You ain't wrong.
Man. Youthful days was different. Now,
right? I
pass by. I'm like, who's that fat guy in the mirror? Hey,
bro, I'm thankful I could just wake up in the morning, man, or get out of bed. Really, I'm like, what this hurts, that hurts. But yeah,
I had a guy years ago. He told me, let's say, how's your day going? He goes, well, I woke up with no toe tag.
That's funny. That's funny, bro. That's ridiculous.
For those of you that don't understand that, when you are put into the morgue, they put a tag on your toe.
That is sad that you have to explain that, but that is today's society. But
that is today's society. I saw something today earlier that they asked this young lady, what country is north of Mexico? And she couldn't answer it. And surprise, surprise, she was in the United States.
Baby Jesus. Baby Jesus.
Yep. She was also asked to name 2 countries in Europe, and she says, "Isn't Europe a country?"
Wow.
So we'll just
All
leave
right.
that at
Well,
that.
thank you guys for listening.
Well, guys, thanks again for stopping by. We really appreciate it. The channel would be nowhere without you. So before we get out of here, make sure and smash that like button, subscribe to Outspoken, share the show with everyone you know, and hit the bell icon to get updated when we upload new episodes. All right, Joe. Well, you guys take care of
And
one
remember,
another.
do better, be better.
And as always,
God bless America.
God bless
you guys have a great one.
America.
We'll see you next time.
God bless. See you next
All right.
Tuesday.